Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting for July 18th, 2019, which is now called to order. We ask that you silence all your cell phones if you have not already. If you are not the applicant and you wish to speak today on a matter, there are sign-up cards outside that we request that you fill out in advance of your speaking. And we request that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. And if you're here on behalf of a group of people, try to have a representative of that group if you all have similar comments. The first item on the agenda is to receive the minutes from the prior meeting. I believe there are some changes to that, to the minutes.
I believe there were some changes. I move the minutes be approved as amended. Be received as amended. They were.
Diane, I know you had one amendment, or a couple of amendments. One was limiting the variance to the east side of the property.
Right.
On case number 5.
Right.
14611. And then reflecting a continuance of case number 14814, and then also adding the elections of officers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there was the election of the officers.
Mm-hmm.
To add that.
So I believe you had a motion to approve the minutes subject to those changes.
Yes, I did.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Record your votes, please. And the minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda, we're going to move a matter 6F1, which is a resolution for commendation of Kevin Donaldson in appreciation of his services on the Board of Adjustment for all these years. So if Kevin could come forward.
You know, I can't believe that you're the chairman.
Miracles happen. I've known Kevin for a period of years, including working for his law firm for a short period of time. And definitely taken his guidance over these years and appreciate his service. Do you have a motion to approve a resolution of commendation?
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
Second.
All those in favor? And it's approved. Mr. Donaldson.
Thank you very much. And you guys do a fine job. The city employees are extraordinary. And you guys do a fine job.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
know. I speak on behalf of myself, and I think the entire board when I say we certainly appreciate your service over all these years. So thank you, Kevin. The next order of business we have, Diane, did you have something? The next order of business we have is for continuance requests or application withdrawals.
I have one continuance, item 8, case number 14631. The applicant requests a continuance to the August 1st meeting.
We have a motion.
I would like to move to continue item 4D8, 14631 to the August 1st docket.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to move case number 8, number 14631, to the August 1st meeting. Cast your votes, please. And the motion's approved. The first items requiring separate vote, case number 14621. The clerk could read this case into the docket.
Request of Megan and Kevin DeShazo for a variance to the expansion of a nonconforming structure located at 1321 Northwest 19th Street.
the applicant present?
How's it going?
If you could just state your name and address and present your application, please.
Yeah, Kevin DeShazo, 1321 Northwest 19th. It is for, we have a garage. We're just going to add up, not changing the footprint, adding a garage apartment. And I believe current ordinances, we are about 3 feet too close. I think it's 10 feet and we're 7 feet. But we're not changing any of the actual structure footprint of the building.
In your application here, you go over the statutory conditions that you think you've met. If you could go over those for us, please.
I'll be honest, I don't have any paperwork. We got robbed, and my car got stolen, and all the documents were actually in my car, which is why we missed last month's meeting. It's a fun story.
Well, perhaps I'll just go through them. The first requirement is that you establish an unnecessary hardship. So if you could explain how this condition is an unnecessary hardship.
We're just trying to add value to our home, and if we don't get this approved, we have to tear down the structure, move an extra 3 feet, and rebuild an entirely new structure, as opposed to just adding to the structure that's already there. So it's additional cost, additional hardship.
Okay, and you've got to establish that this condition is peculiar to this piece of property, that the relief, if granted, would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes and intent of the ordinance or comprehensive plan, and that this variance that you're requesting is the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship.
Correct. Yeah, it's we've had conversations with our neighbors. They're all approve of it. They're fine with it. It's not going to cause any harm to their properties. It's not going to devalue their properties. I think it will actually increase the value of their properties as it increases the value of our property.
Board members, any questions?
I think on your application, you went into detail about the flooding issue, and because of the flooding in that location, you were really not able to function, and that you needed the second story. Is that still the case?
Correct, yes. And we will put some things in place to alleviate some of that flooding, but that first floor is still not going to be a livable structure.
And that there were other, although it's not relevant necessarily for this decision, there were other locations they noted that there were structures similarly situated, and they noted that it was not something that would be visible from the street. So
Correct.
I think he is getting to the hardship, although, I mean, dealing with the flooding issue.
Yeah.
That's the only question I had, is I'm not sure he clarified that.
Other comments from board members? I can get my thoughts out there. I mean, my largest concern, as you might have anticipated, is just you're exacerbating an already non-conforming condition by increasing it, in my mind. And that's, you're kind of exaggerating this non-conforming condition. And, you know, for those reasons, I'm certainly hesitant, but certainly welcome the comments from the rest of the board.
I'm almost the same as you. I would like, you already explained a little bit, but if you go more in depth, because we do need to meet some statutory requirements. So if you can explain a little bit more about what the hardship really is, because we know the existing building where it sits, but if you can explain a little bit more, that might help me to get a little bit more in your case.
Sure. So the general idea is it's a garage right now that's just used for storage. The way the property is structured, and it's a 103-ish year old property. The current, so you can't see it there, there's a drain in front that's not large enough, and it sits fairly low, so right in front, it goes down, the grade goes down into the garage. So if we get a decent amount of rain, drain floods, garage floods. So we're going to add additional measures to prevent flooding. We looked at the structure. The initial thought was we may just have to tear the whole thing down and rebuild a garage and a garage apartment. We've had architects look at it. It's structurally sound. We're just going to move up, essentially cut the roof off, go up, which saves a significant time and cost and inconvenience for neighbors to just add length to a project that's already going to be a lengthy project. So it's doing this is efficient from a time perspective, from a cost perspective, in adding value to our home, and being more effective in how we cause somewhat of a inconvenience to our neighbors as we do the actual work. If that makes sense. I don't know if that was the answer to your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, kind of my position is just, I think I could get with you on the non-conforming use of the current property, but making it larger, I can't support that currently. That's just my position, and I'm only one board member, but that's where I currently am.
I did have a question of staff on this. This is a non-conforming use, meaning that the setbacks were different, and this was built prior to the modern setback requirements. Is that correct?
That's right.
And in the review on the favorable consideration, you said the footprint of the building does not change. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, we're just pointing out that the nature of the nonconformance is the setback, so that's basically the footprint of the building. His addition is going up, so that we're not changing, we're not encroaching any more than it's already encroaching. We're just adding a room on top of the existing encroachment.
I can say, so long as we're not going outside of where the encroachment is, I do understand it's non-conforming, so this is probably more than 50% when we build up? Possibly? Or not?
Well, yeah, he'd be almost doubling. I mean,
Okay.
he would be going over that 50%.
I mean, it does alleviate the drainage issue. That was kind of where I can, definitely cost and finances can't kind of support on that, but when it comes to the drainage and if it's going to solve and help the surrounding,
Yep.
I can support that.
I have a motion? I can't make a motion. So.
Well, I'm going to move to approve case number 14621 for the reason that it meets the statutory requirements, most particularly with the substantial detriment and hardship, and it was built prior to the modern milling setbacks, and it didn't, as defined by staff, did not increase the change of the footprint.
Second?
Got a motion and a second to approve case number 14621 for the reason that it meets the statutory condition for a variance. Cast your votes, please. And the motion's approved.
Thanks. Next steps, or we're just good?
Yeah, application's approved.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Item number 2, case number 14623, application for special exception of Jason and Sharami Thomas to allow home sharing at 4813 North Miller Avenue.
Hello.
Well, if you could state your name and address and present your application.
Sure. Sharami Thomas, 4813 North Miller Avenue, Oklahoma City.
Okay, could you explain your application, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you explain your application, please?
I'm just trying to get a license for our Airbnb. So, yeah, we bought the home for our son September of last year, and he's traveling so much now that he was there for 2 or 3 months, and it didn't make sense. He decided to move out. He's kind of all over the place right now, and so anyway, we decided to do something with it, turn it into an Airbnb for now, and then that way whenever he settles back down and he's not traveling all over the place, then we can take it off and we have a home for him. So, yeah, it's our only one that we have. We don't have 10 or 12 of them. So,
You're aware that there are a few protest letters
Yeah.
on this application?
Yes.
Did you want to address any of the concerns of the Protestants?
sure. Yeah, I'm happy to help. I've got some pictures that I took. We have a lot of security and things around our home. Obviously, if there's anybody that's at a major loss, it would be us if someone damaged our property, took all of our furniture, ruined anything in our home. We put a lot of money into it. We've re-landscaped the whole front, backyard, and everything as well. We have a security camera at the front door. Obviously, we don't put them inside. That's not appropriate. But we have one at the front door so that you can actually see in the courtyard. We have locks in the courtyard. We also have a lock on the back gate to get through in the backyard. And we have a camera on the back door so you can see the entire backyard, people out there as well. We have the NoiseAware app, which honestly a lot of people, if you're doing an Airbnb, should be required to have. It's my opinion, but the NoiseAware app and these sensors, I have one inside and I have one outside. So what happens is if it gets too loud and it goes on the decibels, then it basically sends me a text message. It tells me what's going on. I can very easily look into our cameras and see. It will tell you if they have corrected the problem as far as just being loud for a minute, and it goes back down, which is kind of nice. And then all I would have to do is send the text over to them or contact them. But honestly, I've had it go off a few times, and it's been before midnight. I mean, it wasn't, 2 or 30 in the morning. The only time it's gone off at that time would be when we had our storms. So it's the only time I've had it.
How many rooms
3.
were you listing? So you're listing 3 rooms?
It's the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how many people are you advertising
6.
this?
You can get 2 in each bed.
And you said this is your only home sharing property?
Our only what?
Home sharing property?
Correct. Yes. We live in Deer Creek. We have 4 kids. We are there almost every single day. You will see our cars there. We were out there all morning, mowing, weed eating. If we're not there every day, we're there every other day because we actually manage and maintain it ourselves.
Okay.
We sold our business downtown. I'm a designer. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And I'm doing flip projects and different things like that. So I have the time to be over there. And we communicate with everyone. I think Airbnb does a decent job in how what they ask for. You have to have a valid ID. We've made ours to where you have to be 21 and over to rent it. Ours is $199 a night, so it's not a $50 a night cheap place. There's a $25 cleaning fee as well to it, and there's a $200 deposit. Not everyone does deposits, but like I said, I have a lot of nice things in there. Sorry, it's my phone keep going off. So I don't want my stuff stolen, broken, ruined. I do communicate with everyone. On Airbnb, they actually require you to send a little message. You have to know how many people are coming, all that information. It's really no different than a hotel. We were in Palm Springs all week, and they didn't ask for anything as far as a driver's license for the hotel room. We didn't get asked anything about our license plate tag or anything, background check, anything like that. So,
How long did your son live there?
about 3 months.
Okay.
And he travels all the time. He's doing modeling and things, and his girlfriend's in LA, so he's just kind of all over the place. It just didn't make a lot of sense. But at some point, he's young, and he'll get to the point where he'll settle back down, and we'll have a cool little place for him. So, yeah.
Board members, any questions?
This is a clarification. You
Sure.
are not attempting to rent out your Airstream that's in the backyard, is that correct?
No, I actually have pictures. That's a storage unit, and it's on a concrete pad. I mean, as far as I know, you're allowed to have your RV stored in the backyard. Is that correct?
It depends on where you are. I'd defer to
Okay, I guess we
Mr.
need to
Travis
ask
on that,
someone and find out. We didn't want it in the driveway. That seemed a bit much, especially for such a little house. We actually craned it over and put it in the backyard. It's on a concrete pad because there was already an old existing storage unit there when we purchased the home. So I've got pictures if you guys want it. It's a storage area. So it's really just being stored there on a concrete pad. There's no electrical or anything.
And I noticed on Miller Avenue, that appears to be a travel-type street as opposed to one where occasionally I noticed, I went by a couple of times, that
Yeah.
off-street really isn't utilized much there because of the way the traffic flows. So how can you address the issue of 6 people on the
parking
issue? and the
Usually,
other issues?
if people are coming in from out of town, most people that have come in from New York and LA and different places like that, they've Ubered in. They don't usually have a car. We've had up to 3 cars there before. So it just kind of depends. I mean, sometimes people park on the street if there's something, like I'm hosting my best friend's 40th birthday party at the end of the month there, and I'm sure there'll be some cars out on the street until midnight, until we're done, so.
Any other questions before we hear from some other folks?
You say you rent the property in the past, is that correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
yeah. Whenever he moved out, I actually rented it out to several different people back in December, around the holiday time.
I mean, there was no one living at the house at the moment that you rented?
No.
You rented the whole, okay.
Yeah, back in December. It was right around Christmas break. I'm wanting to say like the 14th, 15th. It was a weekend, like a Friday and Saturday. Yeah, and then they told someone else, and I've had 2 different people rent it out.
And has that been through Airbnb or one of
It was
the-
not. No, it wasn't through Airbnb. So when I read the licensing information, it basically said if you're renting it out, you can be grandfathered in, but I didn't have it on Airbnb. I didn't put it on Airbnb until May, I guess, of this year, so I felt like it was the right thing to do to come and get a license. I mean, I've got an email from the girl that rented it. I don't know what type of information you would actually want. I don't know what type of proof or type of documentation that you would want for something like that. But that's really you guys' call if you want anything further on that. But actually putting it on Airbnb, we felt like this was what you're supposed to do. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't really know what's the type of documentation we're asking for when they're applying
Yeah,
for
so
it.
we typically ask for some sort of transaction history if they've been on Airbnb, or receipts, or some sort of written rental agreement, or something that clearly documents that had happened prior to January 15th.
I have an email from her that shows it. She said she would be happy to notarize it and do anything like that, but
I
that's
assume-
really all I have. I don't know.
Yeah, that was over, I assume
hard.
that rental period was over 30 days. Is that correct? Was it longer than 30 days?
It was 2 nights.
Oh, that rental agreement was?
No, it was just she rented it for 2 nights at $100 a night.
Okay.
So we just had the house vacant. There were beds. I mean, it's fully furnished, so.
Any other comments? Okay. You'll have an opportunity to speak after we hear from the Protestants.
Sure.
The first person we have signed up to speak is Lex Payne.
Do you guys want any of these pictures with the cameras or the noise-aware
I'm okay with that one.
sensors or the Airstream?
Yeah, I'm okay with that one for now.
Airstream on the pad? No? Okay. Just making sure. Okay. Do I need to go over here?
Yeah, if you could take
Okay.
a seat, we'll hear from Mr. Payne.
Lex Payne, 4808 North Miller. This application for special exception is not in harmony with the policies of Plan OKC, the adopted comprehensive plan. I found the root word safe, whether it be safe, safety, safer, unsafe, 32 times in Plan OKC. 24 times were in the section titled Live OKC. On page 224 of the plan, neighborhood safety is the #1 goal of our comprehensive plan, Live OKC. On page 225, under the heading Our Goals, Every resident of Oklahoma City should be able to live in safety in their neighborhood, free from fear. As indicated in the documents I submitted to the Board of Adjustments July 11, 2019, concerning this application for special exception, we feel the safety of our neighborhood should be the priority when making this decision. A tragedy should not have to befall a fellow citizen of Oklahoma City to reinforce our safety concerns. Bringing unvetted, unaccompanied strangers into our neighborhood is not in harmony with the policies of the adopted comprehensive plan, Plan OKC. With an absentee host, they are not placing themselves in the same jeopardy they are placing the neighbors. The absentee host is not exposed to the same dangers they are forcing upon our neighbors. They and their family are living safe and sound somewhere else, without all the comings and goings of unvetted strangers around their home. This safety issue should be foremost consideration when deciding the fate of this application for special exception to the municipal ordinances. As citizens of Oklahoma City, we should be able to feel safe in our homes. With this applicant operating this property as an absentee host home share, I no longer feel safe in my home and neighborhood. As I presented the letter from Mayfair Heights Homeowners Association to others, residents on the 4800 block of North Miller, they also express concerns for their safety. Mayfair Heights is an urban conservation district. Our neighborhood deserves equal protection as assigned to historic preservation districts. To obtain a license in a historic preservation district, it must be the host's primary residence and occupied by the host at the time of the rental. With the home occupied by the host, they are placing themselves in the same danger that they are placing the neighbors. This should cause the host to thoroughly investigate the identity and background of the renters. The host will be placing themselves and their family in the same danger. I identified 19 places in Plan OKC that refer to neighborhood safety, citizens feeling safe in their homes, neighborhood, community. I have passed those out for your consideration and to be placed into the record of these proceedings. There are other code violations, parking issues regarding this property, some of which were addressed in the documents I delivered to the city July 11, 2019. This Board of Adjustments has the obligation and authority to deny this request for special exception to the city's home sharing ordinance. Please deny this application for special exception. My safety and the safety of my neighbors is in your hands.
Board members, any questions?
You understand that this is an ordinance that's been adopted that provides for a special exception.
It does, but it doesn't require you to approve it.
The fact that there is a decision made by the legislative body of the city council, it is permissible, it's permissible to grant that. And I would like to ask staff on this. You made a determination that it met all the requirements for the granting of the special exception?
I'll chime in there because my reading of staff's comments in this regard, in all these cases, is staff will opine on whether an application can meet or cannot meet the statutory conditions, not necessarily that it has met the conditions. So, okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
Correct. Specifically, did you make a review of the comprehensive plan with respect to that and make it a recommendation regarding compliance with that? The fact is that if you just say safety, that's just a word in there. The council made a decision you could approve.
It's 32 times in the comprehensive plan, and according to the staff report, the first item on that is being in harmony with the comprehensive plan. How can bringing unknown people, additional traffic, constant movement, one of the things that the police department asks that neighbors do for crime prevention is notice what's going on in their neighborhood. Taking notice of who's there, when they're supposed to be there. With this type of motel operation, we never know who's supposed to be there or when. Just 3 years ago, the neighbors at 4820 called the police because they noticed a pickup backed up into the driveway of 4816. They were hauling stuff out. Took the police a long time to get there. No one was caught, but the thieves were brazen enough to come back 3 hours later. Noticing what's going on in your neighborhood promotes safety in the neighborhood. And it is a key point in the comprehensive plan, and on the sign right outside here, the city council, the third item on it is safe neighborhoods. In the ordinance describing home sharing, at the end of the statement says that it should be the host's primary residence, and there's a semicolon. A semicolon indicates that everything before that is a complete statement. There's city lawyer present today?
Yes.
Okay. Am I correct in that that semicolon indicates that the prior statement can stand by itself? Everything that follows it should be a separate statement and is related to the first statement.
I don't have the exact wording of the ordinance in front of me, but the ordinance provides that you can obtain a special exception if it is not your primary residence, and that's why there's a special exception process and why we're here today.
Okay.
And interpretation of ordinances and binding the city and, in the middle of a hearing, I don't think is appropriate, so I wouldn't want the municipal council to opine on, legally what the definition is of a sentence and which clause is binding and that kind of stuff. So.
There are parking issues. I have some pictures.
So are there code issues or violations from the Action Center for this property? I have a question. Have there been any issues at this property in the past?
I don't have the exact date of when it occurred, but the police were called sometime after the first of the year. I'm not exactly sure of the date. I went to the police department to try to get that information, and without knowing exactly what the nature of the call was, I didn't get much help out of the person behind the bulletproof glass on finding that information. The first picture is July 4th. There's 7 cars. The reason I was out in front of my house at that time was people down the street were setting off fireworks, so I went down to encourage them not to do that anymore. Started up again at 8:30. There's 7 cars in that picture. There was 8 at 8 o'clock. You'll also notice that the second car in the driveway is blocking the sidewalk. Okay? We're not permitted to block the sidewalk with parked vehicles. Okay? The driveway isn't long enough for 2 modern vehicles. There is a carport, but the carport was designed for 1940s model vehicles. Once you pull in there, you can't open the door and get out. So the only time that the previous owner of the home, Trent, pulled up in there as if there was going to be a hailstorm, and then he crawled out the back hatch of his vehicle.
Got one more person signed up to speak. Mr. Fanning, we appreciate your comments. William Neeland is also signed up to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is William F. Neeland. I live at 4812 North Miller. My vantage point of the property is directly across the street, and my den window, where I spend some time reading and watching TV, looks directly down the driveway of the property in question. My observations today are more or less personal, based on having been a resident there since the early 80s. And there are situations there that have occurred that are of a concern. We are in a private neighborhood. The street in front of my house and the house across the street in question is in a school zone. Issues that I personally have seen, and most of these are within the last week or two. Trash cans not being removed from the curb after 2 days. It's not a regular occurrence, but it has happened. Multiple vehicles parking in the driveway where we're blocking the sidewalk, which is used frequently in our neighborhood. The sidewalk was a new addition on the part of the city's improvements in the last couple of years, so we appreciate that. Lawn sprinklers have been running on an even day, and of course it's an odd address, so we don't run our sprinklers. Parties and or gatherings of more than 8 people have been witnessed during the daytime. Parties gathering more than 7 people at night. As many as 8 private vehicles or more have been parked on the street. And of course we have pictures of all this and the dates. The comings and goings of 3 private vehicles are being recognized amongst our neighbors that belong to the property owner and any regular help that's being done there as far as cleaning, lawn mowing. So we recognize those, but we don't recognize any longer who should be there, what vehicle should be there, how many vehicles should be there. There's no one to talk to. Matter of fact, I admit that it's been only within the last month that I found out that we have I thought it was a bed and breakfast. I've stayed in bed and breakfasts before, and this, they tell me, is now an Airbnb. Now, I stayed in a bed and breakfast, and the owners lived there. They provided a meal. They provided some very helpful information about the locale. But I didn't know really what was going on. The neighbors and I have talked amongst ourselves about what is going on. There's always different vehicles there, always different people there. The issue that was questioned with Rex about, I personally saw 2 city police cars, 1 sheriff car. I was there on a Saturday at the beginning of the summer, and they were there for about an hour and a half. There's been a commercial, 12-passenger, 1-ton church vehicle, I thought, with 8 or more children that were parked there overnight, and that was recently. There was a nice Gulfstream trailer in the backyard. We wondered maybe that could be used for living quarters. It's certainly a nice piece of equipment. The host on site is essential for the harmony of our neighborhood. If I had children there, we do have 4 children that live within a couple of houses of this residence, and my daughter or son was walking to school, because we have Monroe School 2 blocks to the east, and somehow my child never made it to school, and the Nevada car that was parked there overnight could have been a suspect, because we as neighbors no longer know what car should be or shouldn't be parked there. Would be a big concern. The fact that we have video is possibly helpful. Sunday, an interesting event happened, and I've been told that the house is also has accoutrements and accommodations that allow photography. And so I was sitting watching a sporting event Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, sir, if you want your comments in the record,
Sorry.
stay by the lectern.
Watching this yellow-dressed, vivacious-looking young lady going through some unusual-looking movements in the front yard, and there was a lady taking her picture. I said, well, that's unusual. But the thing that was really phenomenal was, as this lady there's a mother walking by with a dog and a young son, maybe 4 or 5, walking behind her. And I take a picture as they're just coming onto in front of the property. And this young lad's head is going like this. I take another picture, and they're exiting the property, and the boy never looked forward. He looked at that young lady all the way across. Now, possibly the host should have a posting that photography in the front of the house is discouraged. But this young lad was somewhat transfixed, as I was too. We have lost our security. I do like the city's 10 commandments out here, where the third statement is peace, security, and tranquility. And we've lost that. And so I've also, as an engineer, we try to tell our clients not to do things after the fact. Go around as a property developer, talk to your neighbors, tell them what you'd like to build, what you'd like to rezone, try to get a consensus. We haven't been talked to. They've been in business without appropriate license. And there's nothing that compels you to say, to approve this. Nothing at all. Thank you for the time. Any questions?
We appreciate your comments, Mr. Nealon.
Yes.
If we could get the applicant back up here for just a second. And a couple of questions that could obviate the entire dispute here. You mentioned that you had one, at least, incident of renting this property.
Of the police?
Correct.
Yeah,
And
I
what,
actually...
what was the other one? What was
I
the other time you leased this property? What were the conditions around that? Was that
What other...
another short term? You mentioned there were 2, you rented the property twice before this, is that correct?
At Christmas vacation last year, yes.
Okay, and how long was that?
They were just a couple nights.
Okay, and then another time after that?
Not until then we put it on Airbnb.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is, I mean, you potentially could be subject to having this property grandfathered in to where you wouldn't need a special exception from us. And so I think probably the prudent thing to do, take the opinion of the board, maybe the board has a different take, but my thought is you might get to the remedy that you want without having the board have to make a decision because you're grandfathered in potentially. I don't know if those prior rentals would qualify you. I have no idea, but that is an issue that you might want to consider.
It didn't say anything whenever I was reading up about it, so honestly, I couldn't tell if I was grandfathered in. I don't know what type of documentation you would need. Like I said, I do have an email. But
well, what I'm asking is perhaps you'd want a continuance to look into those issues,
Okay.
which again could take you outside of having to have a decision by the board.
Okay.
And still get the relief that you want. If the city says that you do need a special exception, you'd still have this application on file, and we could get you on the next docket. But that's kind of where I am right now. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but okay. So would you like a continuance, or would you like a decision by the board?
I guess continuance, but what do I do at that point?
I would talk to city staff, and they can
So
point
go
you in the
back
right.
and-
Yeah, they'll point you in the right direction of the folks to talk to. I mean, I think it's advantageous to you in that you don't need to come to us and get a special exception potentially.
Okay.
And you don't need to have a ruling by the board. You could just be grandfathered in. So it sounds like you'd like a continuance.
I mean, that's fine if it makes it easier. I mean, I really were there all the time. I mean, I really don't feel like there has made it unsafe at all. I tried to call to find out about police, or I was told IMSA was there. All these, I've been told a lot of different things by, I guess, the neighborhood association. There were some people that said that they wouldn't sign off on it, and they're the ones that contacted me, and I can't find any records of anything. I've given them my address. I don't. So, like I said, it's totally up to you guys.
Well,
So.
Well, it's up to you. You would be the one requesting a continuance. So if you think you can substantiate possibly getting grandfathered in, you probably want a continuance.
And if not, then
If
sure,
not, you come
I can
back here.
back.
And kind of for the record, the comments of the Protestants, those are in the record. So if you do come back here, those protests, we'd still take those into consideration if you came back here. Do I have a motion?
Date, we want a continuance for August 1st.
The first meeting is August 1st, and then I believe August 15th.
Would that give you enough time, August 1st?
Probably the 15th, unless you have some kind of urgency. The August 15th would probably give you plenty of time.
Yeah,
to
no,
hash this out.
that's fine. Yeah, getting kids back to school and all that fun stuff.
So I would move to continue the item to August 15th. Is that correct?
Have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second to continue case number 14623 to the August 15th meeting. Please cast your votes. And the motion's approved.
Item 3 is case 14625, application for special exception of Michael Bunt to allow home sharing at 3031 West Wilshire Boulevard.
Hey, Preston Bunce, 3031 West Wilshire Boulevard. I'm requesting special exception to approve home sharing without the host living on site. In support of my request, I'd like to share information about the property and our intentions. My wife Blair and I have enjoyed traveling and staying in numerous Airbnbs around the world. We've had such a wonderful experience, we wanted to bring the same high-end feel to Oklahoma City and run one. Purchased the property back in November of 2018 with the intent to use as a short-term rental. Its central location makes it a very desirable destination for travelers, and our research shows that there's over 20 Airbnbs within a 2-mile radius of the property. It's in Nichols Hills, Lake Hefner, Classen Curve area. Since purchasing the home, we have worked extensively to increase the home value with over $20,000 in renovations. The property has 3 bedrooms, and each has their own bathroom. We have chosen to list the home for a max of 6 guests, ideally targeting business travelers and small groups. My wife and I serve as the host and property manager, and we will be in constant communication with guests before and during their stay, and we only live 15 minutes away from the property, so we can be there promptly if needed. Since this past November, we've enjoyed getting to know many of the permanent residents surrounding the townhome. Our closest neighbors are fully aware and support our intentions with the property. With that being said, we've been made aware of the opposition letter and want to address those issues at this time. So our opposition states that an R4 zoned property is too compact of a space to allow home sharing to take place. Prior to purchasing the property, we ensured there was no covenants or zoning restrictions, and we dispute the fact that each resident living there willingly chose to live in a close quarter environment with the condos or the townhomes. And with our rules and restrictions in place, it is unfounded that the short-term renter will disturb our neighbors any differently than a long-term owner or renter. Parking capacity, our opposition states there's only 2 parking spaces allotted in the address, and that we're struggling with parking issues, and they are correct in that. There's a lot of residents who park cars and boats and trailers on the curb, not in the 2 allotted parking spaces. So I'd like to note that this location meets the parking standards for a residential home with 2 spots, and we will be very adamant with our guests prior to their booking that they're only allowed to have 2 vehicles, and parking in neighboring spaces or on the curb is strictly prohibited. And we feel that 2 spaces is very adequate for 6 guests, a max of 6 guests. Lastly, our opposition states that Airbnb would increase the threat to the safety and undermine neighborhood relationships. Again, to dispute the claims, offer the following. Many of the surrounding properties are used as long-term rentals, and with our thorough screening process, which includes Airbnb's screening of criminal and sex offender registries that they do prior to somebody being able to book anything, it's unfounded that our guests would pose any additional threat to the safety of our neighbors and their property. And then I'd also like to note that of the 11 individuals that signed the opposition letter, only 6 of the units were actually, 6 of the units were outside of the 300-foot radius area. So they won't be really affected by the use of an Airbnb at our property. But lastly, we purposely built and maintained a great relationship with some of our closest neighbors, including next door. I have a letter of support from one of my neighbors I'd like to read you guys, if that's okay. It's very short. So this is from George and Carly Waller. They live 2 doors down. Regarding the property located at 3031, we have owned our property at 3035 for more than 10 years, and during this time we've seen many renters come and go. Many renters take little or no concern to their property. Most of their yards are knee-high with weeds and grass. The most recent owner of the property, Preston Bunce, has made numerous upgrades to the house, improving the property value. Also, he takes the time to ensure the front and back of the property are well maintained. We live 2 doors down and have no issues with the parking or excessive parking. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Board members, any questions?
Several things. I think that it's very clear that absolutely there cannot be more than 2 parking spaces taken because of the location. I went out there, and it's very tight, and you can't be traveling on Wilshire. As you know, you can't park there.
Yep.
So I'm having trouble with your addressing the number of people who would be staying there, but you said something about a guarantee there'd only be 2 cars. How are you going to enforce that? I'm having problems with 6 people at that location, particularly as the layout and some of the issues that were addressed by the protests. And we don't have a copy of the letter of support. I don't think we need that.
The copy of the support letter? Okay, I've got 2 copies here. So to address your question of how are we going to do that, it's our intention to strictly enforce that with our rules of you can't rent the property, or you can't have more than 2 vehicles at the property at any given time. I feel that 6 people and 2 vehicles is very reasonable. 3 per vehicle, but that's. We have 2 parking spots and 2 vehicles allowed is all.
How many rooms are there?
3 bedroom, 3 bath.
Okay. So one of the conditions we've done in the past is these These special exceptions are one of the few areas where we have quite a bit of discretion to condition any approval as we see fit. The city council is allowed for that discretion. And what we've done in the past is, and not to say that this would take place here, but is condition approval on only advertising one of the rooms or two of the rooms for rent, or, the requirement that any advertising of the property has to say that only 2 parking spaces will be strictly enforced, or something like that. And then if code enforcement finds that, or any kind of enforcement entity finds that that's been violated, and that there's advertising for 3 rooms where we've approved 2, you immediately lose your special exception. So that's some of the things we've done in the past, and I think the board can entertain in this case as well.
It is, I guess 2 vehicles for 6 people, is that extremely unreasonable, or?
I would say for travelers, getting pretty close to being unreasonable. But that's just me. I'll wait until the rest of the board opines, but are there any other questions?
I think if some of the others are minorities and not driving or something like that, but I think if you have 6 people and they're depending, you're going to have at least probably 3 cars, possibly, in a city like Oklahoma City. So you're going to be having a problem unless they're all related in a nuclear family kind of thing. I don't know.
I have a question. Have we ever put restrictions with parking spots before? I know we did on the last one.
The issue was enforcement of that, obviously. The last time this came up, or last times this came up, was enforcement. My kind of remedy for that was to require of the applicant that they have to strictly advertise that there are only 2 parking spaces, and they can't just leave it open for as many parking spaces. There needs to be in the advertisement a strict requirement for only 2 parking vehicles or something like that, similar to the number of rooms, with the understanding that it would be difficult to enforce that. But one easy way you can enforce that is you look at the posting and you look at the advertisement and see if the applicant has advertised 3 rooms when you've only allowed 2. Are there any other questions before we hear from someone else? I've got one person signed up to speak. If you could take a seat for just a second. I've got Jamie Taylor.
I'm Jamie Taylor. I own 5 properties in that townhome strip of community. I own a 3125, 3113, 3109, 3063, and 3061. I purchased these properties over the last 10 years, and I've invested over $50,000 into each property, upgrading them, bringing the value of that townhome community to where it is today. If you'll let me just read what I have written, because I'm not really good at speaking off the top of my head. But my objections are voiced today. They're personal, to protect my investment and the investment of others in our townhome community. I do not believe it will add value to our neighborhood. I own 5 properties, as I said, in that strip of townhomes. We've invested in the properties and also invested close to $50,000 per property. I rent them for $1,100 to $1,500 a month, providing a safe and quiet home for my leasers. These properties require the utmost communication between residents to keep everyone aware of anyone on our properties that we're not familiar with, and we are very good. My leasers and the people, because I know about everybody that lives there on those properties. Having home sharing with residents we're not familiar with will cause nothing but confusion and require us to be on constant watch of who's on our properties. These properties, as you can see, share walls with each other. We're not separate residential homes. The concerns about the noise because of the nature of the sharing walls. Parking, as we've stated before, is a concern. I'm unaware of how, if you rent out 3 rooms, you have 3 renters, and you have 3 cars, and you have 2 parking spaces, how that will add up to, it won't. Any additional parking would require you to park in emergency lanes. There is a berm way that between the breezeway of the street and Wilshire, and parking along that berm this way, which would be perpendicular to the parking spaces, is the emergency lane. People do park there, but it is illegal, because if an emergency vehicle could not have adequate access to any property. We're just concerned about the safety of the transients changing daily and weekly. My intentions with my investment was to provide a peaceful, secure home for my leasers, and I fear that that will change the nature of our quiet, peaceful community and the desirability for people wanting to live there after spending the last 10 years increasing the value of these properties. I have no interest in going towards devaluing them. This rezoning is not in the best interest of our townhome community in providing a safe, quiet neighborhood to live. Do you have any questions?
I have one question. If you could speak to the devaluation point, I know that's a point that gets raised in a lot of these applications. My understanding of these home sharing properties globally, one of the criticisms is they tend to have the opposite problem, because you can now market this property as a home sharing property that brings in $3,000 a month or whatever it is, and it kind of artificially inflates all the surrounding properties and negatively impacts the surrounding property owners by raising their property taxes. And so, that's one of the concerns around the country, which, again, I think if you, and I'm open to a view that says that you'd be adversely affected and your properties would be devalued, but that was my understanding of one of the criticisms of these home sharing properties, is that it actually has the opposite effect, which causes the opposite problem. It prices people out of these areas.
Well, I think you could probably choose to read it either way. That is, like you said, artificially inflating the value of the property. The value of the property has a dollar value, and it also has a value for people desiring to live there. My investment in my property requires that people feel safe, people know who their neighbors are, and with an Airbnb just, half a block or just down the street from them, I see the potential that people would say, I don't really want to rent from you because there's, transients community, 5 doors down. These properties, there are 2 sets of townhomes. They all run together with one street that provides access to the back alley to them. All of my properties are on the west side. Mr. Bunt's property is on the east side, but we are all together, as you could see from, the map that you have. Like you said, I see that as an artificial inflation. Because, I could rent all mine as Airbnbs and make a lot of money, but that's not my intention to with what I have invested. So mine is to provide safety and security for my leasers, and I see this, and at the very least, like I put in my letter, I don't know if you had access to it, that my opposition letter, the very least, if you were going to go ahead and okay this, would be that it would be on a temporary basis so that we could see how this works in our community. This community's been there since 1975, and I've been familiar with it since then. My aunt has lived there. Since then, I used to spend the night there in college. So, I'm familiar with these properties for a long time.
Board members?
So,
Who lives in your properties?
who
You
lives
lease
in my
them out?
properties? Do you want the names of the people that live in
Well, do you lease them out?
Yes, I lease them out. I've leased them all out and have never had a problem holding. I rent them to, like I said, from $1,100, $1,500 a month. They rent to usually all young professional people, because That's the kind of property that I provide.
So how many years have you been leasing your facilities, your various facilities?
I started 10 years ago.
So you've
buying
been
and-
doing it for 10 years. Have there been any complaints against the use of outside people to be living in your area?
No, not at all.
Do you live in one of them?
I do not. I live 2 miles east of there. I live very close. I spend a lot of time there, as a good landlord should. And no, I have renters that have lived there for 3 to 5 years at a time. They have changed over periods of time, but I've always had them rented. And quite frankly, the work that I've done in that community has increased the value of the properties for those around me because of what I've done.
So for those that are leasing, how many cars do they have? Do they have 2? Do they?
Mostly there's 1 or 2, because I usually have one, a single person or 2 people or a couple that lives there. The properties that I own on the west strip of 24 townhomes, they have garages. So there are actually 4 parking spaces available on that end. On the end, the eastern strip do not have garages. There's yards where the garage is there. So those people are required to park in the front 2 spaces that you saw the picture of. And so there are only 2 spaces available. Unless you want to cooperate with the neighbors and ask, and I can promise you, when somebody parks in front of somebody's space that it's not their car, they go out and look and see who it is. At least on my end, they do.
Any other comments?
Just another question, since some of the concerns were noise, parking, safety. You already talked about how your properties are different, but I wanted to know if you have ever experienced any problems with noise from your tenants or any of the other neighbors, just to have an idea of the area and how the neighbors work there.
I have not. I have not had any complaints or any problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
We appreciate your comments.
Sure. Thank you for letting me speak.
If the applicant would like to come back up. Board members, any questions of the applicant?
Question. So do you live around the property? Or
I live
already just-
15 minutes north.
Okay, so you take care of the property yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. On Airbnb, it's published as 3 bedrooms, but if we were to require also limited parking to just 2, is that something?
Yes, and that's something I kind of wanted to speak to again. We say in the rules it cannot exceed 2, and two parking spots at all, 2 vehicles.
What about if it was 2 bedrooms?
There's 2 parking spots. So it's not that we're leasing out each room individually. If somebody's going to lease it, it's the entire property. It's the entire house that has 3 bedrooms. It's not 3 different groups staying in each bedroom. So we can assume that they'll travel in groups. Me personally, when my wife and I travel, we use Uber quite often, or even in groups. And I know that Oklahoma City is a little bit more spread out, but there's.
I think the issue there would be not that you'd rent out each room individually, but you would market it as 2-bedroom and not 3-bedroom, thereby limiting the number of people who might. If you limit it to maybe, or advertise it as 4 people instead of 6 people or something like that, I think is probably what Ms. Patel was getting to.
That does hurt us in the opportunity for a family to come who has, 2, 3, 4 kids that would definitely be all traveling together in one vehicle.
I understand. I think if the alternative is to deny the application, you would probably still take that.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to that.
Sure.
So, for Jamie, I know that you're aware she doesn't live on site, leases them all out. I think it's the same kind of situation as what she has. We have tenants, and nobody knows. Nobody's going to know before they lease her spot that it's an Airbnb or transient renters. So Anyway, and only two of her properties are even within the 300-foot radius. And I'll speak to them. They do look fabulous. She's done a lot of great work to the outside to increase the value, but so as we have as well.
Can you talk a little bit about noise? We heard some of the objections were noise, parking, safety. You already talked about parking, but what things do you have in your listing or do you have in place to address noise concerns and maybe safety?
Yeah, so for the noise, I mean, that other girl was talking about that app she has. That would be a great thing to add to it, but we asked them to be mindful of their neighbors and quiet afters after, I believe it's 9 o'clock in the evening. But also to reiterate, my immediate neighbors who are next door and we share walls, they don't have any issues or concerns with parking or noise or any of that.
I have a question. I'm trying to get a handle on this issue. If you not limit to 2 families, but limit to 2 renting units instead of, although you might use 3 bedrooms because one of the groups might have children or other things in the family unit, but could we limit to, say, 2 groups who would be renting that particular facility? How would we want to do that?
Or how it's advertised as up to 4 people or something like that, or up to 6 or 5, whatever the board wants to do. But I think by limiting it to the number of people might be an easier way than by group. Do we have any questions of the applicant before we go? Okay. We appreciate you. Oh, did you have one? Okay, yeah. Sure.
If it was limited to a time span, like say, because we can give up to 10 years, but if we did it for a year or something, is that and then have you come back? So in that time period, if there's any complaints, is that something you're okay with?
I'd rather have a longer period, but if that's what the offer is, and yeah.
Okay. We appreciate it. Yeah. Board members, any comments?
I was just going to say I feel more comfortable talking about the parking spaces because that's the one thing that is the limiting in that location. I mean, I'll say if my family rented, well, I don't have kids yet, but if a family rented that place and have to use the 3 bedrooms, I think in the last case that we saw, I think that property had like maybe 4 bedrooms. It was a larger property than the one we're looking at.
My comment would be that there was a concession part, I think Mr. Taylor was talking about, that they would sort of be agreeable with a trial period of 1 year. And I believe the applicant is sort of reluctantly agreed to accept that 1 year, rather than trying to limit the number of rooms and everything, just to make it clear that it has to be limited to 2 parking, 2 cars and 2 parking places as a condition in that. And I would be in favor of a year. So
I think we're on the same page on that as well for the year, but then not. My whole thing is if the whole Airbnb side, if the issue is parking, how about we get a complaint before we limit the room usage? Because if there are kids coming in, and so I'm okay with allowing for the 3-bedroom to limit parking spots and for a year, see how it goes. If there's an issue, then any opposition can go to the Action Center, and then that year comes up, and then that license can be pulled.
Yeah, I'll just weigh in. That's kind of, sure.
So the Action Center, is that, if something's called in, it has to be like a written violation, correct? Okay, so it's not can't just call in. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So neighbors can call into the Action Center if they notice that there is potentially a violation, and then code enforcement would come out. And then whether or not there was actually a violation, you would receive a notice of violation. And there's a lot of procedures before you'd get a conviction in municipal court.
Perfect. Yeah.
That's kind of where I am. I can get on board with the trial period, particularly since the Protestants have said that they wouldn't be completely against the trial period. One thing that I know I'm sensitive to is these different uses coming in and changing the character of a neighborhood or a condominium complex or whatever it is. But I'm very sympathetic to the concerns of a lot of the Protestants that say, this is the first time we've been this united on anything, but we're a very tight-knit community and everyone in the neighborhood is against this use or whatever it is. That's not necessarily dispositive, but if I think as the board starts to see the character of an area change because of this type of use, I will certainly start to get much more critical of these types of applications. Here, I don't think we're quite there yet, so I can get on board with the trial period of 1 year and then the strict condition that it'll be advertised as 2 parking spaces only and strictly enforced.
Yes, I'll agree with your statement as well. The character cannot change with this comprehensive plan along with what we're doing right now, so we'll definitely have to look into that, but we only have our set standards that we can go by, so it's kind of, but I'd love to put a motion for what you just mentioned, for a year trial period, limit to 2 parking spots, and if there's any issues, then, Action Center will let us know.
That would be for 1 year, right?
For 1 year.
Second that.
We've got a motion and a second to approve case number 14625 for a special exception for a period of 1 year and the condition that the property will be marketed as strictly only having 2 parking spaces available. Cast your votes. And the application is approved.
I'll read items 4 and 5 into the record together. They're at the same location. It's case number 14627 and 14628, special exception of prime investments to allow home sharing at 900 Northwest 13th, apartment 106 and apartment 206.
Scott Henderson, 418 Northeast 15th Street, application for the subject property, 900 Northwest 13th Street for short-term rentals.
You could just go over kind of the substance of your
The property
application.
you're looking at has been vacant and distressed for a couple decades. The entire building is currently under remodel, soon to finish in a couple of months. Total project is between $1.5 and $2 million. There's no parking restrictions given the overlay district of DTD, and all the tenants and the short-term people that are visiting will have a dedicated spot. It won't be marketed until, obviously, the certificate of occupancy is in place.
And it looks like there weren't any current, it's not finished yet, so
Correct.
its intended use will be, I assume, apartment complex and not the entire thing full of short-term rentals, right?
That is correct.
Board members' questions?
The question I have is this the same application for the next one too? Same, correct? So you're just asking for 2 apartments to be Airbnb?
Short-term rentals, that's correct.
Short-term rentals.
Just
What about the rest of the space within that?
The rest of the space are going to be tenant occupied under 12-month leases.
12-month leases. And is that part of your property? Is that your property, this whole property?
Correct.
And with this, so this is more of an apartment setting when it comes to code enforcement, like building codes? Is this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It also has fire suppression.
Any other questions of the applicant from the board?
I just wanted to know these apartments that you're asking for, this special exception, how big are they?
For the
106?
apartments?
Uh-huh.
Are you talking about the entire building
No.
that we're looking at, or the individual units?
All of it, I guess. How many units are in the whole
Sure.
building?
There's
And
14.
All right, and then the 2 that you're at, apartment 106 and 206, how many bedrooms do they have?
They're just ones.
They're one, okay.
Any comments from the board?
I went out there, and it looks like a perfect thing for an Airbnb, in an apartment setting, and you said you had vacancies and this kind of thing, and it has a parking scenario, and I think it would fit in with an Airbnb. So I would support it, but this board has been reluctant to go past 5 years on ours, even though we could go up to 10. I would not support beyond 5 years for that, but at the current time.
Yeah, I think 5 years would even be pretty generous, just because we don't know how the ordinance is going to develop, but how these types of uses are going to develop over the next 5 years either. But yeah, I mean, I'll put my comments out there. I can support it. I think the fact that it's 2 out of 14 units is acceptable. I know we're a little bit cautious that, this doesn't turn into a hotel or something, but that doesn't seem like it's the plan here, so I can support it. But I can't make a motion, so.
Yeah, and I can support it as well, so I'll make a motion to approve a special exception for case number 14627.
Do you, the number of years you'd like?
Oh, for 5 years.
5 years? Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve case number 14628 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 5 years. Cast your votes, please. And the application is approved. Both applications, I'm sorry, I should have read that a little bit differently. We combined those, so that's for both of your applications. Well, okay. I'm advised by municipal council that I need 2 separate motions. So that was for 14628. And so we need another motion for 14627.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the special exception for case number 14628 because it meets the statutory requirements for special exception for a period of 5 years.
Second.
14627. We just voted on 14628, so this one's for 14627. And
Okay.
the second?
I thought I read this one
Yes.
first.
Okay. Please cast your votes, please. That motion is approved for case number 14627 and case number 14628.
I thought I read this one.
Item number 6, case 14629, special exception of primary investments for home sharing located at 1100 Northwest 27th Street.
Scott Henderson, 418 Northeast 15th Street. Application for short-term rental at the subject property that you're viewing currently at 1100 Northwest 27th Street. The picture that you're looking at there is actually on the front. They're attached. I'm considering those townhomes. Those are currently rentals. I think you have a picture of the back, and if you keep scrolling, there's a garage apartment, which is what this application is for. You see the stairs to the side, and one of those particular doors on the left is for the proposed unit. So that unit does have its own dedicated underneath parking space, and there is only one neighbor, residential neighbor, that's to the west. South is a commercial space. East is the main road, and it sits on that corner of Northwest 27th and Western. It is an efficiency, as you classify it, with one bathroom, roughly 500 square feet.
Any questions from the board?
How is the structure of the building? Is it occupied currently, or what's the use right now?
Yeah, so the original structure, it was acquired through a receivership. And they were rentals and vacant. And there's actually 2 other units to the west of those doors that are accessed individually through a set of stairs. Those are rentals. That's also where the on-site maintenance guy lives for the entire portfolio that we have. As far as the structure, it's cylinder block in the back for the first floor, and then wood siding from 1 going up to 2.
So it's usable space at the moment?
Yeah.
So you're just asking for one of those units that are upstairs and back?
That's correct. There is another one that's been grandfathered in.
Okay.
Yeah. It's side by side.
What's the address of the one that you're asking for?
It is 1106B. Is it in the application? I didn't print that off. No, I think it's just 1106. 1106. The letters get quirky in the back, so I think it's 1106 Northwest 27th.
So is the address different for each unit? No, right? So it's 11.
I think we looked at it as 1,100 is the entire property.
I think we need to specify in any motion that it's for that one unit, and it looks like the applicant said that it's 1106. And it looks like there's an A or a B there.
Yeah, whatever it, B or C, I think it's B or C, or the maintenance guy changed them because there was a mailing address issue with USPS when we acquired it, but we can get that corrected and just make it that individual one.
It's that first unit on the end?
The one to the west of it, the one on the right part of the picture.
Are there other tenants living? Oh, I already asked you that. There's only the maintenance person there at the moment. Okay, and how many total units are there?
I'm sorry?
How many total units are on this?
On the garage itself?
Or
on that building structure, there's 4.
Okay.
There's 4.
We will need it to be clear in the record which specific unit this is.
I think it's C. It's C. 1106
Well,
C.
I think the issue that we're having is statutory notice. If it wasn't specified as that particular unit in the application, then arguably appropriate notices didn't go out to the public, and so we might need to continue this and have it come up at the next meeting. I mean, I would rather do that than cause a problem for you later on down the road for failure to have adequate notice if someone wanted to object at some point in the future. So would you be amenable to continuing it to the next hearing?
If necessary.
Well, I'll say this. I don't think I can support the application until that gets done. So I'm only one member of the board, but...
Can you clarify, since you have the application in front of you, what it does say? Does it just say 1106?
No, it just says 1100, which is what I understand is the entire building.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. When I asked the ninth floor what to put, they didn't know.
Understood. I think there's been some clarity here, though.
What does the notice say? Do we have that handy?
The notice says 1106, but the agenda says 1100, so I think that's where
We have an
the
issue
problem.
with the
Right.
posting.
So since the public agenda does not have the address that is also included on your application, we'll need to remedy that.
Okay.
So that then the public is appropriately notified of what your application is for.
And was there an amended, because I did see an email from John Wilson that something had to be amended. Is perhaps that's what it was in reference to?
I think that
because a new mailing had to go out?
I think that was to address Ms. Lewis's concerns and her amendments to the minutes. That's what I understand. It was that the current agenda didn't accurately reflect some of the positions and also the agenda, but I don't think it was a specific application.
Okay.
So do we have a motion to continue the hearing to the next meeting?
How much time do we need?
So
do we
we need to continue it for another date certain so we can have it properly. The notice was correct for the right address, 1106, but the posting is 1100. So we maybe continue it to August 1st so we get proper,
August 1st is plenty of time.
that would be plenty of time. Okay. So I would move to continue your item 14629 to August 1st to allow the publication change.
Got a motion and a second to continue case number 14629 to the August 1st meeting. Cast your votes, please. The motion's approved.
Item 7, case 14630, request of 2017 Paseo for a variance to the maximum 6 square feet for an accessory wall sign in the NC Neighborhood Conservation District at 600 Northwest 29th Street.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant, who's also here with me. This is an application for a variance to the size of the sign that would be allowed within the Paseo. When you look at the regulations that govern the Paseo, staff is correct in noting that it was intended for the small type retail shops that exist. So when you have a unique large structure like this, especially on that curved street, the 6 square feet just simply isn't enough to adequately reflect the size and scale of that building. Because of where it is located, this sign was required to go before the Urban Design Commission, both for design approval but also a recommendation on the variance to come before you. In April, the Urban Design Commission did hear this case. They did approve the design, and they did unanimously recommend approval of the variance. We have laid out our statutory conditions within the staff report. You're being handed the image that's also on the screen that shows the sign. It's also worth noting that there is widespread support for the sign and for the design and the size of it that I think should be in your staff report as well. So when you look at the ordinance, the hardship that we believe we have is the sign of 6 square feet is just simply not adequate for the size of the building. In terms of uniqueness of the property, twofold. One, it's large. It's much larger than most of the other structures within the Paseo. If you're familiar with the area, it's mostly small retail shops. Secondly, the bulk of the building actually goes west, and so a very small piece of this sits on that curved street. And so until Mr. Sherman had hired me and had me look at this, I've driven through the Paseo countless times. I'd never noticed this building, perhaps to the point why we need this variance. In terms of the third element, I don't believe that there'd be any detriment to the public good. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I believe it will allow for a sign that is in keeping with the Paseo, but also in keeping with the size and scale of the building. We believe it to be the minimum necessary. When you look at the image before you, I would submit that it is in keeping with size and scale, not overly done. It doesn't take over that streetscape. So all factors considered, we believe we meet the statutory elements required for a variance. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have and ask for your approval.
Board members, any questions of the applicant? I'm very familiar with this area, and I've actually lived, I think this is the old market, right? And it's being rebranded now, so I've actually lived there. My, I guess, concerns here are this is not a hotel or a restaurant or anything like that where you particularly need a variance to the size in order to attract the people that you're trying to attract, because they're residents and presumably they know where they live. And so I'm not sure if there's a hardship here. I understand maybe granting a smaller variance, but I just don't know that I can get to a variance that's almost 3 times what's allowed in the code.
Well, so if you think about the size of a 3x2 sign that would be allowed, I think that would look silly, right? And so perhaps even a size that was doubled wouldn't be in keeping with the scale. And so when you think about signage in terms of scale, I think what you see before you, it is in keeping with the scale. These design review committees are specifically created to think of things like aesthetics and scale and design. And it was their recommendation that this was, the appropriate size. They were unanimous in their vote. And I don't know that it's necessary for the residents to live there. Certainly, they know where they live, presumably. But others, people that are interested in living in the Paseo. Like I said, I've driven up and down this street countless times. If I were driving around and interested in living here, I may not know that it is an apartment building. And you think of other apartments around the downtown urban area. Right across the street, if you looked out this window, you'd see an extremely large sign on the side of the Montgomery building. I'd say it's larger in scale compared to the building than is proposed here. I believe there's similar signage as you look at other developments in the downtown area on a little bit of the outskirts that have also been approved. So I do think it is in keeping, although it sounds big to say that it's almost 3 times the allowable size. When you consider the allowable size is only 6 square feet, it's not that big. You know, it's 16 and change square feet, and so it's still a small size compared to what you typically see in signage.
Yeah, I understand. I think that I would agree that the size that the code allows is a bit small for such a large building. I would agree with that. I just think this one, as rendered, is a little bit large. I could get on board with maybe 10 or 12 square feet of variance, but that's kind of where I am, and I'm only one member of the board.
If I'm allowed to comment here, I think deal with configuration and the layout of Paseo. It has curved streets in different ways and comes in different directions. I think that makes it a little more difficult to actually find the complex that you're looking for, and I think the signage is tastefully proposed, and urban design took a pretty harsh look at that. I do think it wouldn't necessarily fit for everything in Paseo, but I think given that it is sometimes difficult when you're driving around Paseo to find certain places. So restaurants are easier, but the apartments are different. Other places are not. So I think it would be in order in this case.
And if you think about, and to your point, the Urban Design Commission does. I mean, most of the time when I'm standing at this podium as it relates to the Urban Design Commission from the Board of Adjustment, it's because I'm telling you that what they've decided was wrong. Here, I believe they got it right. So if you think about the way that this sign is designed with the word "the" and the APTS on the bottom and Oasis, I mean, you're not going to be able to shrink it anymore on the 25 inches, and so you're going to lose the verticality of it. And so when you lose the verticality of it and try to shrink it down a foot, what you're going to get is a sign that all of a sudden doesn't look right. And so the scale, because of the way that the lettering works, is what needs it to be this and why it's the least necessary, the minimum necessary to alleviate that variance.
Yeah, I understand. On the location point, I mean, the Oasis is not difficult to find. You go down Paseo Drive, and it's literally right at the corner as it starts to turn. So if you're coming, whether you're coming north, south, it's right there. So you'll see it. And the Paseo is just such a unique area in our city. I'm just reluctant to, and more hesitant to grant any kind of variance or special exception, for that matter, in this area in general. And if I am going to grant one, I think this one in particular is just a little bit too large for what I could get on board with. Again, I could get on board with 10 to 12 square feet, but as rendered, I don't think I could support it.
One of the problems with 10 or 12 square feet, because it's a design district, I mean, we'd have to start over with the process. To your point, it is it's an urban design district area, and they are very stringent in how they interpret their regulations on the design side of it. So, I mean, when you start shrinking that down, all of a sudden it looks really tiny on that long wall as it's all along that street. So I don't think visually it looks correct, which is why they were unanimous in their recommendation on the design side of it.
Board members?
I absolutely agree, Sam, what you're saying, but I'm not even from there. So when I look at this from a policy or procedure standpoint, I'm thinking about the design committee and what they've already agreed upon, And so it's kind of like, if they've already done that homework, do I want to go back in to change that portion of it?
Yeah, my thought, I guess they recommended approval on the variance as well, so that is consistent with your point. But they're looking at, I think, the design and not necessarily the merits of a variance the same way that we are. And so that's why I'm a little bit stricter on the size requirements.
I almost feel like I would like to have a statement from someone that was part of that design review committee to see if they looked at different designs, if there was smaller proposal, and maybe the applicant is the one that wanted the larger one approved. Because if there was a smaller one that makes sense, I could be on board with you too. Maybe not granting such a large variance.
So if you, that's a good question. Typically, Lisa Cronister is here with the planning department. I don't know if the staff report from the Urban Design Commission is in the materials you were provided, but the applicant did work with staff throughout the application process. And so I'll read to you their considerations that were contained within the urban design staff report. The applicant is working with a larger scale multi-unit apartment building and is seeking adequate exposure and identification for the complex along the Paseo frontage of the project. The maximum size for attached signs that are not located on an awning or a window is 6 square feet. Staff believes in this instance a 6 square foot sign would be inadequate for identification purposes. In addition, 6 square feet would be out of proportion in terms of scale in relationship to the size of the overall project and, more specifically, to the size of the wall in which the sign is located. That's the argument I'm making, that as you take that curved street. Staff believes that the proposed sign is an appropriate size for a sign on this wall and that it is not out of proportion with the project wall. For these reasons, staff supports the requested variance from the maximum display surface area.
And I should have asked this first. Is this illuminated or is this not?
Is it backlit and internally lit? Sure. It's internally lit. You got it.
Steve Sherman, I'm the owner of the property. And what we started with was, at the recommendation of the sign manufacturer and designer, was 11 feet. And then we talked to Joy Rebelt, who owns substantially all the property there. And we are very friendly, and we got down to a point where she liked 8 feet. She protested, rescinded her protest letter, and stated that she supported the 8 feet. We looked at 6 feet, we looked at 8, we looked at 10, and David was correct that when you bring down the verticality, it gets squished out, and it just doesn't look right. And there were pictures submitted to that effect. And so this design, if on the picture that's showing, the banner that's attached to the light post is 4 by 2. So we're saying, so the sign that we're drawing is 8 by 2. And if you look at the picture to the right, you see that the sign is barely above the top of the light because it's a very tall wall. It's 30-some feet, I believe. So we have the approval of 4 property owners. They're Jeremy 4-acre that's developed 2 new shopping centers. There are 2, where Oso Restaurant is and where Frida is, down the south side and going east. Rachel Cope, who's just opened the Japanese restaurant and owns 2 properties on Paseo. And then we have Joy Rebelt, who owns so much and has approved it. And we have Amy, and forgive me, I forget her last name, but she owns 612, which is directly to the west. And we've spent a lot of money and given it a lot of TLC. We've landscaped everything outside. We've done very mellow lighting. We've done all the inside. We've really upped it quite a bit. And I think it would be a great addition. The smaller signs, Michael Philbrick told me that when they revisit the municipal code with regard to Paseo, his department's going to recommend enlarging the signs because it's just not really workable, doesn't make a lot of sense. So we own a lot of prominent properties here in town. We're really good citizens. We improve everything we touch, and I would really appreciate your consideration. Lighting, it's backlit with we have a cream-colored plastic that will show through on the cut letters, and it's on a dimmer, and I have promised Joy, and we'll commit to it here, that we will keep that. It's going to be a glow. It is not going to be boom in your face. So, and it's also emergency vehicles, deliveries, Uber. Nobody can find this building. David said he'd driven by it countless times. I bet I've driven by that building 200 times before I bought it. Had no idea that it was an apartment complex. I mean, seriously. So anyway, hope you'll consider it and give us a break here. Thank you.
One of the things that we have to consider in granting a variance on something like the dimmer, I agree, I don't want a bunch of light, bright signs on down Paseo Drive. I don't think you do. I don't think any of the property owners there do. But we can't really condition that in a variance. All we're doing is granting a variance to the size. And so if some new property owner came, they can have it as bright as they want, and they can have it subject to these dimensions. And so that's a concern that we have, not necessarily with you as the owner, but for future owners. And Ms. Belt's concern in her letter, which has been rescinded, but certainly a concern of the board here, is whether we open ourselves up to a slippery slope in the area of saying, well, the Oasis has a sign that's that large. The city is going to amend the code and allow it larger signs at some point. And so you should grant a variance for our business, and then we become a de facto city council or planning commission.
Well, except that you'd have to find each of the four elements each time. So there'd have to be a unique factor that would accompany. It would make my job a lot easier if I got to come to the podium on Thursdays and just said, well, I did it this time, and this time, so I'll take my green lights now. Everyone's going to have to meet those statutory elements, and I have no doubt that this board will hold them to them strictly.
Any comments from the board?
I can say that I like the fact that the owner is hands-on on it and talking to all the property owners around it, because that's one of the big things when we give all these variances, when they're not involved as a community as a whole, that's kind of, I would be a little shaky on.
Yeah, I'm only one member. I still would like it to be a bit smaller, but any motion from the board so far?
I move to approve the variance to the maximum 6 square foot accessory sign in case number 14630 for the reasons that the statutory requisites have been met.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve case number 14630 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Cast your votes, please. And the motion's approved.
Thank you.
Item 8 was continued to August 1st. Item 9 is case 14632, request for variance to maneuver in the street right-of-way located at 715 Northwest 64th Street.
Good afternoon, Mark Zidzow with Johnson & Associates on behalf of the applicant. We're here requesting a variance to the maneuvering within the right-of-way along Northwest 64th Street. We rezoned this property last year into an SPUD after working with the Planning Commission and then the property owner to the south. This is very close to the site plan that was submitted and approved. The site has very unique challenges. Cindy, would you mind pulling up the aerial? Northwest 64th Street does not extend to the railroad track to the east, and nor are there plans for it ever to cross. Additionally, there were issues with sewer connectivity. The only place that could be sewered on this property is the far west portion where we place the building. So placing the main entrance, for obvious reasons, is where you'd want your visitor parking. And then, Cindy, if you could go back, to the site plan. When laying this out and having to meet drive aisle requirements and fire code, it gets very tight in being able to place anything else within the property. Additionally, personal storage by its nature is secured, so having the gate at really the only feasible location for the entry drive is where it was placed, leaving the parking with essentially requiring to be on street. And so we think it's a somewhat standard request of on-street parking that you would be backing out into the right-of-way. But given that there's no other property owner along the north side of the property to the railroad track, and then on the south side being undeveloped and with a parking lot, that we don't believe the maneuvering is going to cause any traffic issue.
Have you reviewed the comments from Public Works?
We provide a bit of a pedestrian pathway around the front of the building back to the west. Again, though, given what is going on the property to the east, it's hard to imagine that there would be any reason for pedestrian traffic to be traveling on the north side of the street down to the railroad tracks, given that there's no crossing and we're the only user on the north side of the street.
Board members, questions?
No. Is it ours to handle on this, to allow, I mean, I do staff too on this?
No, the sidewalk requirement in this PUD is a little different. It's based on whether the street adjacent is ever improved. So at this point, they don't need to improve 64th further east, so there won't be a sidewalk. If it ever is improved, then a sidewalk would be put in, but that's not likely or far off in the future.
Fairly a dead end. In fact, it took me a while to even find it. And I was kind of familiar with the area. And we've gone through this before about the deposit and the requirements, but in this case, it'd be up to, upon the application to make a decision on that. I don't.
I mean, that was my concern. I think it's peculiar.
No, the sidewalk issue would really be taken care of at the building permit stage.
Right. It would be taking care of the building. And
it'll either be required or not, but it's all based on whether the adjacent street is improved.
Yeah, and that was purposeful when we did the SPUD application, so we're not here asking for a variance to the sidewalk. And so if it appeases the commission, I'm sure we can work a sidewalk easement on the west side where we're placing the pedestrian pathway so that they'd be able to get around if for any reason someone was transversing that area. But when you look at this side and you start going north, a lot of the properties along the railroad track, a lot of those streets have been either closed or in the process of being closed. We closed Northwest 65th because our development is going through that. It's hard to envision this area becoming a place with many crossings over BNS Railway as it's their main line through Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that was my concern. I think it's been addressed, that I didn't want to create a problem in the future, but it sounds like we probably would not be creating a problem if we granted the variance, so I can support the application.
Yeah, I can support it as well.
Me too, I can support it, and I'll make a motion to grant this variance on this case number 14632 for the reason that it meets the statutory requirements for a variance.
I can second it.
Got a motion and a second to approve case number 14632 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Please cast your votes. And the application is approved.
Thank you.
Item 10, case number 14633, request of Mason Realty Advisors for a variance to maneuvering on the street right-of-way, maximum sign height, size, and location on the street right-of-way, located at 820 North Classen Boulevard.
Is the applicant present? Case number 10. Out of consideration for the applicant, I would entertain a motion for a continuance to the next meeting.
Motion to continue to the next meeting. Case number 14634. To August 1st.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to continue case number 14633 to the August 1st meeting.
Yep, August 1st.
Cast your votes, please. And the case is continued.
Item 11, case 14634, application by Richard Starks for a variance to allow a building with exposed exterior metal in the C3 district located at 5905 Southwestern.
I'm Richard Starks. I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property. I'm the architect. My address is P.O. Box 2618, Blanchard, Oklahoma. And the nature of the request is to build a laundromat called Spin City, and we wanted to make the appearance match their other locations. And we've submitted some photos of the other location in Stillwater, and we also emailed a rendering in.
We received them in an email.
Okay. Do you all have them that you can, has everybody seen them, or? I emailed them to John Wilson.
We have them here to reference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. So I believe the intent of the ordinance is to prevent like your standard pre-engineered metal building from being built everywhere because of its economy. And this is, if you look at the pictures and rendering, I feel it's significantly different than that building type. And we have a mixture of different panel profiles and different colors to try to achieve that. So, do you all have any questions or concerns?
It's mainly used for the, in terms of decorative and in place with what your business is. Is that correct?
Correct. It's not actually my business. I'm the architect, but yes, and it's to create a brand for to match their other locations and their other planned locations.
Used in all the locations where they are located. Is that correct? Did you say?
I'm sorry.
The decorative.
Right. It matches identical to the Stillwater location, which is the latest one. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
And this is already developed, is that correct, or are these renderings?
The photos are actually the actual store in Stillwater. And then there is a rendering that is of what this location would look like.
I think it's still vacant, right? Or it hasn't been fully built. I didn't get a chance to go out there.
Oh, the lots are basically a mowed yard with some existing entrances. There's nothing built on them at all.
Board members, questions or comments?
We've approved this on many occasions. This is not what the ordinance was intended to prohibit. It's industrial type metal. It's decoration in compliance with decorative architectural metal panel as opposed to the other. And I would be in favor of this variance.
I agree. I think this case is a little bit closer than some of the other ones we've had, but I still don't think this is the type of metal that the code's trying to prohibit, so I can support the application.
Same here, and put a motion. Put a motion to approve case number 14634.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve case number 14634 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Cast your votes, please. And the application is approved.
Thank you for your consideration.
That's all the items we had on the items requiring separate vote. Additional items, communications and reports. There are no board committee reports that I'm aware of. We've already approved the resolution of commendation for Kevin Donaldson. Anything from the municipal councilor? Citizens to be heard? Seeing none. Other business? Anything from the board? One thing I'd like to have considered for other business, and we'll put this on the agenda for next meeting, is any comments the board has or the public has on modifications to the application. I know there have been some comments from board members of more content that they would like on the application that applicants would have to fill out. So I'd like to put that on the agenda for the next meeting. And also, board members, have your thoughts on things you might want to modify in the application, if anything. And I think that's all we have. The meeting's adjourned.